Thank you for joining me today, Elaine. It's great to have you. This is actually our first time having someone on the VC side join us on the podcast. And this one feels like especially cool because it almost feels like I'm talking to someone in the early days of building one of tech's biggest venture funds.
Thank you.
It's unfolding right in front of us. And I'm really excited to dive into your story coming from Harvard, started your career at Microsoft, then went to Norwest, and now you're at Alt Capital where you're leading things there. And yeah, can't wait to unpack your story today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for it.
Awesome. So just to kick things off, Elaine, I'd like to get a sense of like who you are as a person, and we'll go back to your childhood a little bit here. Like, what kind of kid were you growing up?
Yeah, we're going all the way back. So I'm from Boston. I'm from a suburb called Newton, Massachusetts. Parents are first-gen immigrants from China, and so really grew up and saw my parents living the American dream. So a lot of things were kind of new from the get-go, but I've been told I was a very rambunctious kid. I had a lot of energy, just a lot of curiosity, and so my parents didn't really know what to do with me, candidly. They threw me at a bunch of after-school activities and sports. I did martial arts growing up, I did gymnastics, and then I remember one day in middle school, I was like, I can't do both of these anymore in full time school. And so I had to choose, and that was really difficult. But I ended up choosing rhythmic gymnastics, did that very competitively as a student athlete all throughout high school, and went to nationals and junior Olympics and everything. That was a huge part of my identity growing up. And so, yeah, I'm a big proponent of sports.
Cool stuff. I played sports too, and that's part of why I'm in sales now.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm sure it's led you into VC, a tough industry too,
A
being
lot of analogies between, yeah, sports and sales for sure.
for sure. And I mean, eventually, I guess this led you to Harvard. What was your time like at Harvard, and kind of how did that shape, how you felt about your career and what happened after school?
Yeah, I mean, Harvard was like a dream come true. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and when I got the acceptance letter, I still remember, where I was standing, and my mom was cooking, and she came screaming in from the kitchen, like with a giant knife and everything, and big hugs all around. But Harvard was really magical. I was the first in my family to go to school, like to college in the US. My parents had gone to college in China, and so just figuring out that whole system. But I entered pre-med actually. Really thought I wanted to be a doctor. Quickly discovered after 2 semesters of that 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 was not for me. And I was just kind of looking around and seeing where the smartest people were going. And I was like, wow, they're all going to Wall Street. They're all, joining these finance clubs and learning about stocks and public companies and all of that. And I was like, this is really interesting. So followed that, ended up serving on the boards of two of the biggest finance clubs on campus, Harvard Financial Analyst Club, HVAC, and SWS, which is Smart Women Securities. And then did all my internships on Wall Street. So I did banking at Citigroup. I did hedge fund internship at a biotech hedge fund called Cormorant. And then I did public equities, covered mid-cap consumer stocks at Fidelity for my junior summer. And I was like, this is really interesting. I think the work is super fascinating. But at the same time, it was peak hype cycle when I was graduating for autonomous vehicles, AR, VR, all of that. And I was like, wow, I think all the cool like innovation is happening on the West Coast. And I feel like I've spent 2 decades of my life on the wrong coast, if you will. And so kind of put the 5 year plan to like move to New York and go to Wall Street on hold, and was like, I'm going to be crazy and going to go work at a big tech company. And so that's how I ended up at Microsoft. But to answer your question about Harvard, it was a really, really wonderful time. It was also super challenging. I think it's when you put, the valedictorians and people who are used to being top of their class all in one kind of boiling pot pressure cooker, it's really hard. And everyone's trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do. But at the same time, I think it was a really beautiful time because it really taught you to be fearless in a lot of ways and to be ambitious. Like you would have crazy events and opportunities, like the heads of states would come and you would get to go and ask them questions. And so it really taught me to like dream big and to think big about how you can have an impact on the world.
Yeah, and talk about joining, a school or a place where a lot of ambitious people end up. Like Microsoft's exactly that. That's where you started your career full time. Why Microsoft? Why a big tech company?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful to Harvard in so many ways. I would say when I decided to go to Microsoft, it was an extremely contrarian decision. A lot of people were like, whoa, like, what are you doing? Like, you have this golden path. I had a couple mentors kind of freak out at me and be like, why are you throwing this away? And I was like, I'm just going to try this out and hopefully, see what it is. If I like it, if I don't, hopefully I can pivot back to investing. My then boyfriend, now husband, was also the year above me. He was at Palantir in Seattle, wanted to stay together. So that definitely factored into the decision as well. But that's basically how I ended up there. I was doing business planning for Microsoft Research and a lot of their AI and research teams. So I was doing business planning for a lot of the voice research that was coming out of Microsoft, actually. And so back then, that was very much thinking about how can you plug into Office 365. It kind of took the form factor of maybe we can create a hardware device that sits into a meeting room that does a lot of speech-to-text transcriptions and, factors related nicely into M365 and that suite. And back then the technology wasn't there, like there was no models, like parity wasn't there yet, and it's been really nice to see that kind of full circle moment now where now I invest in a lot of voice AI technologies and data companies that are building and helping the labs companies build awesome voice models. So I credit a lot of that to like seeing the early research and like what the future could look like back then. One of the craziest stats that I still remember is if you took and chopped Microsoft up into all of its different business units, every one of those business units from, Office 365 to Surface to Xbox to Azure, they would all be Fortune 500 companies, which is cool to just meet a lot of the GMs of engineering, of product, of finance. Like a lot of them have gone on to be CTOs, CFOs, CPOs, et cetera, that I still interact with in my role today. So that's been a really awesome network to have.
And eventually you leave Microsoft, you combine your internship experience in investing with your newfound tech experience. How did you make the leap from Microsoft into venture capital where you ended up at Norwest?
Yeah. So when I was at Microsoft, I was like, I thought I wanted to be a CFO. That was like the path I was exploring. And I was like, okay, I understand what it would have to take. Like I understand that I have to kind of do rotations across like FP&A and like understand investment relations and all the different skill sets and tool belts. But then part of me really missed investing. I really missed like the fast-paced nature of it, the learning aspects, just studying a bunch of different markets, meeting a lot of founders that are really pushing the boundaries of the future. And so I joined Microsoft's venture team, M12, and was there for a little bit before my last firm, Norwest, headhunted me. And that's when I moved to the Bay Area about 7 years ago.
Very cool. And had you been doing any like angel investing or experimenting with VC prior to joining them, or like what kind of sparked the interest in VC specifically?
Yeah. I grew up being obsessed with Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. I really loved biographies, and I was just like a voracious reader of biographies and memoirs, and a lot of those were of entrepreneurs who had built companies like Bill Knight at Nike, obviously just like a lot of the Walter Isaacson biographies over the years. And so I think I had this image of what Silicon Valley was. Like I thought it was just back then, maybe I was like 10 years old or something. I was like, oh, I thought it was a literal valley paved in silicon that was like glittering and like all this stuff. So I was like, this is really cool. So I think reading that, I grew up reading a lot of blogs. I remember reading Fred Wilson's blog from a really young age at USV and kind of that exposing me to venture. But when I got in almost a decade ago, angel investing wasn't as democratized as it is now. Like AngelList wasn't as, accessible either. So I actually didn't do too much angel investing. I just met some founders and had some friends who were in venture who were like, you should check this out. Like it feels like what you're saying and like are interested in is a good fit for this. And so I kind of accidentally came into the industry. Like I went from one extreme of like public equities investing and to like, public stocks, studying really old companies that are, 40, 50, 100 years old, to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, doing early stage seed and series A private company investing.
That's so cool how that eventually led you to Alt Capital. I mean, I want to get into it. Like, first I want to say like congrats on raising fund two, like
Yeah.
275 million. That's no easy feat to raise. And you guys got a hell of a team to make that happen. So no surprises there, but such a cool accomplishment. When did that happen? Last week, or you guys
Yeah,
closed out?
the fund has been raised for a little bit and we announced it like 2 weeks ago.
That's amazing. Why don't you just quickly start by running us through the entire process from like deciding what founders to meet with all the way to writing a check?
Yeah, definitely. I would say every fund does that process really differently. And like one of the things that drew me to Alt and Jack and The vision was very much that we got to rethink venture capital from the ground up, start with a blank slate, and be like, okay, if I was a founder, what type of VC firm would I really want to partner with? And so that's the experience that we really aspire to give for founders. And so we really take on kind of like an invited guest mentality and just someone to help you see around corners, etc. And so when we meet someone, it's very much prepared mind. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the spaces that they're building in, but increasingly for us, it's really about the people, it's about the founders and the team. And so we look for people who are really obsessed or very high slope. We often meet with people, well in advance of when they start a company. And so you get to know them and build a relationship over time. So like the first time you meet them is one data point, and then the next and the following meetings, then you have a trend line, then you have a slope, and ideally it's like an exponential curve of just like how quickly they can absorb new information, how resourceful they are, how quickly they iterate. We often see people pivot multiple times, like that's the Decagon story, etc. But it's really about the people, and it's kind of that thing where you know it when you see it. And so it's really hard to articulate, but when you're in the presence of someone really special who's like bending reality to their vision, like you're like, we want to be in business and be part of that journey.
So it is pretty easy to tell, like, would you say after, based on the picks you did with Fund One, like, after your very first meeting with some of these founders, you're like, okay, this is probably going to work out?
I think it's like a thread that you pull on, right? You're like, oh, I have this instinct and I get this really good energy from this person, and I've met thousands and thousands of founders over the last decade, and so that also helps pattern match, and it's very nuanced. And each founder is so different, right? Like David Dai, CEO to Amer, very introverted, but super, like he's like a silent killer. He's obsessed. He knows the space in and out. He's extremely good in front of customers. Very different from like Adam at Owner, for example, who's like super great at storytelling, like eloquent, like has like a bigger than life personality almost. And so it really depends also on the industry that they're going after. Like Adam is really well suited to Owner, and like this firsthand from working there. So I think it's very case by case, and then everyone on the team has a different taste in founders as well. And so the partnership is very much like 1+1 is greater than 3. Ideally, it's 5 or 10 or something like that. And so we definitely lean on each other and push each other. Like iron kind of sharpens iron is like what we strive to do.
So Fund One, 150 million. You guys backed, I guess, was it 20 companies between Series A and at seed?
Yeah.
So what did you learn from that first wave of investments? Was there any themes that kind of stuck out?
Yeah. I mean, obviously AI, and then we have a really core thesis around voice, as I mentioned. And so David Dai is a great example of this. They're in like the AI data layer for voice companies. So they collect a lot of speech data and sell it to the AI labs who are building foundational models for voice models. And they do it in a way where they put themselves into like the mindset of a researcher of like what type of data do you need, and it's about how you annotate it, like you collect it from different types of data. Is it one person speaking? Is it two people speaking? Is it a group? So really, really bespoke, but really coming at it from like they are a voice research lab themselves as well, so they're kind of like their customer's founder, if you will, in that way. So voice is something we get really excited about. We invest in a company called Retail AI as well, which helps build call center automation agents. They're doing super great. We just made a vertical AI voice agent investment that hasn't announced yet, but selling into like HVAC technicians, electricians, helping them book and schedule clients automatically when they're out in the field doing a job. So a lot of different flavors of it, but definitely a category and thesis that we're very bullish about.
Right. And what was the time frame between Fund One being raised and you guys actually deploying? Has it been like the last year and a half type of
That's
thing?
right. Yeah, exactly. And we've just seen so much exciting stuff happen, right?
Yeah.
And just being a student of tech history, Jack was an angel investor as well. Just seeing, 2010s of just the cloud migration, that was the biggest thesis. And so if you took something on-prem and you built it in a cloud-first way, that was almost every company that went public in the 2010s. And now with AI completely disrupting everything, there's an opportunity again to rewrite like almost SaaS 3.0, everything in an AI native and AI first way. But the landscape is shifting, as you know, so quickly, every other week almost. And so you have to update your mental mindset so much. Like when ChatGPT first came out in 2022, there were so many wrappers that were built on top of it,
Yeah.
most famously. And then maybe that first wave of companies wasn't as exciting, but now we're almost on like the second or third wave of those applications, and I think this really has legs. So yeah, we're really excited.
That's super exciting. And with only backing 20 companies, obviously in venture it's the power law. So, one or two or three of these companies are going to return the entire portfolio. Like,
Yeah.
especially with this being the first fund that you guys have, were you guys like ultra conservative with these bets and like making sure they weren't AI wrappers and like making sure you did like several meetings before actually cutting a check?
I would say yes and no. We were very risk on, I would say,
Mm.
with Fund One, and with like the feedback loops being so compressed in AI, if something is hitting, it hits really hard and really quickly. And so we saw ARR and revenue ramps that we've never seen in the past. Like before, when I was trained and when I joined the industry, it was very much like triple, triple, double, double, double was like the gold standard. Like if you went from 1 to 3 to 9 to 18 to 36 in ARR over the years, that was excellent. Now you can have a company go from like 0 to 73 million in top line in 1 year. And so it completely upends that entire framework. So I think it makes sense to, when you see something working, to try to understand why it's working and then be like, okay, I think this makes a lot of sense and we want to be part of this journey.
And now with Fund Two, 275 million there,
Yeah.
almost doubled Fund One. It's a sharper focus on AI and enterprise software.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to like double down on those fields? And I guess what are you doing with your learnings from Fund One to make this one successful?
Totally. I mean, I think we have to understand what game is on the field right now. And of course, AI is definitely here to stay. And we talk to a lot of C-suite folks, CIOs, CTOs, et cetera, and better understand how they're adopting AI. And that just intensifies our excitement about it as well. There's definitely a lot of hunger and willingness to experiment with AI and new startup technologies in a way that we haven't seen before. I think a lot of companies in the past were very nervous to try startup tech, and now it's almost the opposite. I think it's coming top down from Wall Street, from boards, et cetera, and leaders themselves are really excited to be part of the wave of the future and like define what that looks like. So I think that's a lot of why we're doubling down in those areas, and also just because like that's our area of expertise. Obviously, I've been investing in enterprise software for almost a decade. Jack founded an enterprise software company called Lattice in the HR space, right? And so it's very much our bread and butter. That being said, we technically are still a generalist fund, and so we will invest in things outside of that. So we invested in, nuclear. We're looking at some bio investments, robotics. So still very open-minded, and we think like healthcare, et cetera, many ways to generate alpha.
I've been a big fan of Jack's new podcast. It seems like it's been doing extremely well based on the guests he's been able to get.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's my subway ride to work every morning. I'm always waiting for that Wednesday episode to drop. And one of the things he did say on this podcast was looking at different founders. They have to be outlier in some sort of dimension. So, a brilliant technologist or like unbelievably charismatic leader of people or even a commercial savant. But something that kind of is outlier and translates into the business well. How do you like measure for these traits with a founder in such little time? I know you take several meetings with them,
Mhm.
but how do you really measure this?
It's a great question. I think that's one of the hardest parts of the job is like developing that intuition and that business judgment and people judgment. And I think a lot of it just comes from doing it for years and years, just meeting thousands of founders, thousands of companies, seeing how they do and evolve over time. And then you eventually have some kind of benchmark that when you meet someone who's an outlier, like two standard deviations off of what you think the medium great founder looks like, you're like, this is special. So I think it comes with a lot of time. It definitely doesn't just come from like the first or second meeting or anything like that. And definitely like you have to constantly be updating your mental models. Like what really worked 5 years ago or even 2 years ago is not working today. Like for example, one of the biggest paradigm shifts in the Valley has been a lot of firms backing tried and true practitioners who are 35 to 45, have built the software before, are domain experts, and they want to spin out and basically sell whatever they have built homegrown into a third-party service. Like that model is completely out the window. Now it's very much younger founders who are generally between like 19, 25, 28 years old, who are very AI native, super scrappy, they're iterating really quickly, and they're finding new problem statements and pain points to go after, and they have the energy to go after them really quickly. So the velocity is so much higher.
And when you say like these young founders, they're AI native,
Yeah.
like what would you say differentiates somebody who's like really savvy with AI from somebody who's like somewhat savvy, and like how do you become like on the cutting edge of AI? Like, do you have any advice for aspiring founders out there?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of it's just experimentation and tinkering, right? It's just following your curiosity. And so a lot of founders that we meet, especially the technical ones, they're just constantly trying new things. They're like curious and they're like, oh, when MCP came out, I'm going to try this, or I'm going to try this new agent framework, or I'm going to try this new, back when vector databases were in vogue, etc. So I think it's really just about experimenting, thinking, building, and then scrapping and iterating, prototyping, just like doing that, rinse and repeating really quickly. I think the only moat that you can have these days is your developer velocity and how quickly you ship. So it's just about ship, 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 keep going, keep evolving and undertaking the feedback that the market's giving you and, position yourself accordingly.
Right. And you already mentioned, some stories of the founders you invested in, obviously Adam being one. And I guess your mission at Alt is you guys just want to work with people who inspire you.
Yeah.
And what does an inspiring founder really look like to you? Do you have any recent stories that kind of capture that?
Oh my gosh, there's definitely so many of them. I mean, I just am obsessed with David AI. I think that's my personal most recent investment, and just they're my kind of quintessential archetype of founders. Just really wonderful people, down to earth, but extremely obsessed with the problem statement. They both came out of Scale AI, Tomer and Ben, the co-founders. They had worked together there. They had seen, the rise of voice models and seen the need for data in that space, and they're like, okay, I think we can go do this, and then experimented, found a way to do it, and then we're like the first voice research lab that was really targeting this specifically. So that served them super well. I think their brand is synonymous with voice data right now. They're definitely leading the market there, and they're very intense, but they're still very down to earth. They're thinking really hard about culture, the types of people they want to bring on. They're really thoughtful about customer engagements. I mean, a lot of the feedback we got about them is people are really surprised if they learn their age. They're like, they come off as, much older than their years in terms of maturity in the sales process and just how they present themselves. And so I think that is like one example. Like, they definitely inspired me every day.
And I guess part of it is obviously you want to find the right people to back who meet your thesis, but you also want them to want you guys on the cap table. And I'm curious, like in such a super saturated market of VCs in SF, like what is your value prop to founders and why should you guys be the go-to person to invest in them?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a lot of it is the feeling that you get when you work with them. So we try to show, not tell. Like, we really want to be more of that invited guest, that mirror, that coach. And it's very bespoke. It's very white glove. It's not cookie cutter, like, oh, you're building some kind of application layer SaaS company, this is the playbook. No, I think every company is really, really bespoke. And so it's really just listening more than we speak, understanding what the bottlenecks and pain points are. And we've all been operators here. So we can come and be like, okay, let's brainstorm, and like, we want to be an extension of your team. We're not trying to come in and tell you how to run your company by any means, and we're not being helicopter VCs, like checking in every couple of weeks or every month, or there's no rhythm like that. It's again just really, really bespoke and white glove.
One of the other things I wanted to ask about All Capital is that you guys are a pretty lean team. You're a very small team,
Yeah.
and when it comes to like startups, you want to expand, you want to scale your team, and I don't think that's exactly true for a VC fund. And I'm curious, like, what is the strategy for Alt Capital right now? Is it staying lean? Like, how do you guys manage all these investments with only a team of, I think it's 5?
Yeah, the investment team's a team of 3 right now, and then we have Nate, who is our head of ops, and Ali, who's our chief of staff. So scrappy and lean. But I think a lot of the counterintuitive things about Silicon Valley that I've learned is often you can move a lot faster with a smaller team than if you have a larger team. We've hosted execs who've talked about this, and so I think it's really about velocity, it's about focus, and then it's about how do you scale in that way? And it's not necessarily about people. It could be processes. It could be how we think in our frameworks and everything like that. So everything's also just a work in progress and evolution. To your point, we are effectively a startup ourselves. We're building the fund alongside our founders, and I think that resonates with a lot of them as well. Like we have just as much skin in the game to succeed and are invested in their success. That is like completely tied to our success.
Right. Cool. I now want to get into some advice you have for like aspiring founders,
Yeah.
and people who maybe want to take a similar career path to you, get into VC, get into tech.
Yeah.
So venture is obviously a long cycle game. What's, I guess, been the hardest part about building patience and conviction in this job where there's just so many ups and downs? Like, how do you stay calm and happy?
Definitely a real question. I will have to say, like, founders, everyone in the valley is deeply unbalanced in a certain way. Like, the best founders are very unbalanced. They have spikes, if you will. And so I think it's about just finding spikiness and how you surround yourself with other people who complement your spikes. I think that makes a big difference. But it's hard. It's a really hard job. I think a lot of people who join the industry think it's really fun and like exciting and everything's always up and to the right, but there's definitely cycles. Like 2023 was really hard, but it's just about your conviction, your belief in the founders and your commitment to them. Like we signed on to work together for 5 to 10 years. A lot of the time this is the founder's life's work. And so just believing in them when they might not believe in themselves and just having conviction and helping them and giving them every single unfair advantage that you have, be it network, customers, be it just support, emotional support. Like I've definitely almost been a therapist to a lot of my founders. Like they've definitely gone through hard times. Some of them have gone through divorces, like really hard family situations. Like life definitely happens at the same time that you're building a company. So always remembering that human side as well. Definitely matters, but a lot of it is just patience and just again updating your mental models as much as possible, staying curious and just being a student, like having like a growth mindset.
Yeah, I think what you just said really speaks to like going into venture for the right reasons too, because I mean, a lot of people go into it for the money, and I actually heard you say this on, I think it was like the Go to Market or the GTM
Oh yeah.
podcast, that like venture is actually the worst place to go into if you're interested in making a lot of money.
I mean, it's so funny that you bring that up. I just had this conversation with a founder friend. I mean, if you look around at who are the billionaires or who are the wealthy people, they're all founders. They're all owners. Either they own a small business and they grow it, etc. It's very hard to build wealth as an investor. Again, to your point, it's a company takes over 10 years to build and then they IPO. And obviously, most of the gains go to the founders and employees as it should. And we only get, a small percentage of that. So if you play that out over time, it's really not a great way to go, especially as startups. Like 9 out of 10 startups fail. It's a really risky business. It's really challenging. So if you want to go into VC for that reason, it's definitely not the right reason, and you will probably leave the industry really soon. But I think personally, like for me, I just love being a startup helper. I love helping founders achieve their dreams and like make that future a reality. And so that's really motivating and purposeful for me.
What do you say to people who like often compare VC to gambling or just a matter of luck?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of that like BlackRock interview question that's really famous. Like, do you believe in skill or luck? And a lot of it, it's all intertwined, right? Like, I believe that you can make luck by working hard and getting up and just doing the hard things even when it's really difficult. So, for example, if you're a good piano player, is it lucky that you're born with talent, or is it because you put in like 10,000 hours and that's why you're performing super well? So I think a lot of luck can be engineered, but it's also just about like the people and like how you show up and your reputation, like what people say behind you, in or closed door situations. So a lot of it I think is possible, and I think the best place to go after your dreams is Silicon Valley. I definitely still think it's like the land of opportunity.
I mean, most aspiring founders or people who are ambitious about their careers like always consider the jump to like SF, and what specifically gives you such an advantage being in that environment versus like, like a New York or
Yeah. I think like geography makes a really big difference. Like if you want to be an actor, you should be in Hollywood. If you want to be on Wall Street, you should be in New York. Like it's very geographically linked. And if you want to be in startups, like SF is the place to do it. 95% of all startups are here. It's hard. Like I go to the grocery store on the weekends and I bump into founders, or I go to the coffee shop or my like Pilates class and people are talking about microservices. I think that's like this is the only city in the world where that is possible. And I think being someone who came from Boston and almost a Silicon Valley outsider for a lot of times, like I think that was like the most striking part about the culture here. And people are really open to helping, which is amazing. Like you can reach out as like a 25-year-old, like this is what I did when I joined the industry, to a lot of people, and they're very willing to like get coffee with you and mentor you. That's definitely not the case in a lot of other cities, in Seattle, New York, and in Boston where I've lived. So I think that's really special about the Valley.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do you have any like examples of like serendipitous moments that have happened while in SF, whether it be through alt capital or like
Yeah.
just like in your career? Any like stories or anything jump out at you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. One of the people I really admired at Microsoft was one of the GMs there, Chris. He's now the CFO of Visa, which is amazing. He's always been astounding. But I remember I asked him for coffee right before I left Microsoft. I was like, oh, he's not going to remember me at all, etc. And I remember one day I happened to see that he lived in SF. And I was like, wow, okay, like I'd love to just catch up with him. And this was like 5 or 6 years after I had left Microsoft and I'd done a really bad job of staying in touch with him. And I was like, hey, Chris, I don't know if you remember me, but I'd love to like pick your brain about some career advice. And then he was like, yeah, let's go, let's get coffee. And then it was supposed to be like a 45-minute coffee. He was so kind. He sat with me for an hour and a half and I was talking to him about like, hey, like I've been an investor for this long. I've been thinking about going to a startup. This is before I joined Alt Capital. And I'm like, how do you think about your career? And he just like told me so many stories about, people he's known over the years. And I feel like those, like I always love examples and stories of real people. And that was so kind of him. And I feel like that's something that really only happens in SF. And yeah, so I'm really, really grateful for that.
That's super cool. I mean, that's part of what I do with the podcast too. Like some
Yeah.
of these conversations are just like so eye-opening, and it actually one of them led me to a job at Owner.
No
That's how
way. Okay.
hey, a conversation can really
Yeah.
open up your eyes and lead to some interesting places.
Yeah, I want to hear
Um,
this story after.
yeah, I'll share it. Um, okay, so more to the advice side now. Like, what advice do you give to young people, especially like those without maybe like a traditional finance background or maybe without like serious like software technical ability, who want to get into venture at some point in their careers? What advice do you have for them to break in?
I mean, there's so many paths to venture, candidly. There's just not one cookie cutter path. There's so many examples of sales leaders, for example, who, go and become GPs at multi-stage firms. So it's definitely possible. Anything's possible. I think it's like just being passionate about it, like being an advisor. I think the easiest way you get started is like helping a founder in some way, advising them in some way. You can start angel investing. There's a bunch of different angel groups that you can join. But just like dipping your toe into the ecosystem, you can show up to hackathons, like you can help organize events and judge things, etc. So just getting involved in some way in the ecosystem, and then just getting to know more and more people. And I think it's all just about how much you like it and how perseverant you are about it. And if that's your goal, I definitely think it's possible. So I just say like don't give up, and like do fun, interesting things along the way. Like I feel like you do it for the right purpose and it'll work out. But again, for me it's like all about people. So I just like love being around like smart, interesting people. I love being the dumbest person in the room, and just learning.
It sounds like just get in the arena and don't really give a shit what other people think.
Exactly, yeah. Just like throw a bunch of things at the wall and see what sticks and what works. And everyone's so different. Like as an investor, I'm so different than, Jack and my other partners. I think you just like you figure out who you are and like what your taste is, and that's like a beautiful thing.
That's super cool. And what advice like would you offer to founders? There's so many founders out there who, want to raise money,
Yeah.
maybe even not at the right time to raise money. But say when the time's right, like what advice do you have for them as they start getting into meetings with different funds and going about that process?
Yeah, I will say this is probably the best time to be a founder, candidly. There's just so much excitement to invest in AI, etc. So I think like if you're thinking about it, I would like seriously consider taking the leap. And then it's just about understanding, like telling your story well, like communicating that and communicating the vision. And then as much pre-work that you can do, just for, almost for your own, you know, sanity. Like this is your career as a founder. Like this is what you're going to be spending the next years of your life working on. You want to make sure that you're excited about it. So a lot of advice I give my founder or aspiring founder friends is like, hey, like don't rush into choosing an idea or choosing a co-founder. Be really, really intentional with like who you bring on, just because like it's really hard to pivot. Like co-founder breakups are the number one reason startups fail, for example. So let's like be really, really thoughtful about that. And also like go for a really big idea. Don't go for something that's like, oh, you think this is interesting, but maybe the market's not big, but like it's easy as low hanging fruit. Like go for the hard things. Like people really want to be part of something bigger than themselves. It's conversely easier to hire people for a more audacious goal than a smaller goal. Like Sam Altman has a great blog post about this. So I think those are some like the more counterintuitive things that I've learned over the years.
Right. And going back to mentioning like the co-founder relationship, that's
Yeah.
arguably like one of the driving factors behind unicorns. For someone who hasn't found their co-founder yet, like what should they look for? Do they look for people they've known their whole life who have been, successful at something? Do they look for somebody they've never met before who has the credentials and they don't know as well? Like, do you have any advice there based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I definitely see the most success with people who have worked together in the past and have known each other for a long time. So you have shared trust, you've been in the trenches, you've been through really stressful situations together, you've seen how the other person operates and like how they disagree and how they handle conflict. And when you're really stressed, that's when your true characters come out. So it's really hard. I've definitely seen some tough co-founder situations where they've met for the first time and they think they have shared values, etc. But they haven't been stress tested in that way, and like when stuff hits the fan, like it falls apart, unfortunately. So I just say like like be patient. If you're meeting a new co-founder for the first time, like spend a lot of time ideating with them. Like do it when you're tired on the weekends, in the wee hours of the morning when you're sleep deprived, and like see what it's like to work with this person. And then like do you have enough shared values, shared vision, to see a startup through? Because it's like the hardest job in the world to be a founder. It's really lonely. Like people are telling you no all the time. Like you have so much rejection from customers for products breaking yeah, it's a really hard life. Like you don't have weekends. Yeah. So
Yeah, I want to ask you about risk as we get to the end here. VC is, a very risk heavy business, and you've taken many pivots throughout your career. And I'm curious if there's like a specific decision or risk that you've taken that you're especially glad you took.
yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. Like I was just reflecting on this with one of my mentors yesterday, and he was telling me about his career and just the ups and downs. And you never know what someone's going through. And people, get fired and then they have great rises. Some people have great, they're a CTO, they found a company, it unfortunately doesn't go well, but then they 5 years later, are back at being a CTO at a huge company. So I think just like play the long game with people, like never write anyone off. But the biggest risk that I think I'm really grateful I took was actually going to Microsoft. Like it felt so counterintuitive at the time. Like everyone was telling me I was silly. I was questioning myself. I was like, what am I doing in Redmond, Washington, of all places? I never thought I would end up in the PNW post grad. And a lot of my friends were doing very shiny, exciting jobs in investment banking and like flying on private jets or etc. But I think that was actually one of the biggest blessings of my life, because I met so many wonderful people who continue to be mentors to this day, and a lot of that has like served me really well. So just like you never know how the dots will connect, kind of looking back, and in the moment it makes no sense. But I think just like follow your gut, and if it doesn't work out, you're just like, that's okay. Like I took a risk, it didn't pan out, but I'm gonna try something new. And Silicon Valley is like the best place to do that. And people's careers are long. Like this could be one chapter of your life. A lot of people have different chapters. Your first chapter could be investment banker, and then you could, move into the startup world and then be a COO, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna go open like a hotel in like Bali or something, and like then you could come back. So yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and I feel like you got pretty lucky with your first job after school, given what you just said, because a lot of people end up in, investment banking or consulting, and I mean, it's a great way to train resilience, and I don't want to bash any of those industries, but certainly the people who end up becoming founders after that look back on that time as, oh, I was not playing the right game. I think I heard Jack say that about his banking experience right after school. So it's cool that you ended up with something that felt right for you. And back to risk here, like, what are your feelings on like risk tolerance as a subject, and like how has that like changed your career? Like, would you consider yourself more like a risk averse person or
Yeah.
risk tolerant?
Totally. I think a lot of it, like my upbringing, especially as an immigrant, you just have such a scarcity mindset around so many things, around your financial stability, around like your future prospects, etc. Everything just feels so fragile. So I've had to really unlearn and unprogram that scarcity mindset over the years. I was definitely very risk averse. Like when I went to Microsoft, I was like, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Like, what am I doing here? I was like really down in the dumps for a long time, and it's like nicely worked out, but I never could have predicted this would be my life if you had asked, 22-year-old Elaine this. So it's kind of just learning as I go, and I've learned to be more and more risk on as a result. And a lot of that's just like inspiration from like working with the founders and CEOs I get exposed to. I'm just like, wow, like you moved here with nothing from, India or Canada, and you're just like, gonna go all in on the startup. I'm like, that is so amazing and so incredible, and like I'm always so inspired by that.
That's an amazing story. We have a pretty young audience, and I want you to give some advice to them. They're, young professionals, people who are graduating school still, people who are ambitious and want to do something meaningful with their lives. Um, but a lot of them don't know what that looks like just yet. What kind of advice do you have for these types of people?
I definitely relate so much to that. Like that was me, sitting in my dorm room when I was 18. I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, and there's always just like this fear of like I want to live up to my potential, but I don't know what that looks like. So I definitely relate to that, and I think my best advice would just to be like, you're doing great, believe in yourself, keep trying. Like if you're tired, rest, don't give up. Just believe that things will work out, stay really optimistic, stay foolish and have fun along the way, but just work to take action, turn over the next set of cards, and then go from there and just keep going. And then eventually you'll look back and be like, wow, like I'm somewhere where I'd always dreamed I wanted to be, and I never knew it was possible. So I'm like a living embodiment of that, and there's just still so much more I want to do. And who knows, I don't know if I'll do this for the rest of my life, but I want to just have fun and work with awesome people along the way.
That's great advice. And last thing, if you look like 10 years down the road, what are some things that you want to accomplish, or where do you see yourself?
Oh my gosh, I think if you had asked me this like when I first graduated college, I would have been like, I want to be a CFO, or like I want to be like on the Midas list, etc. But now I think I measure success in a really different way of just like how many people have I positively impacted. And that's like not exactly quantifiable or tangible, but it's like a feeling. So is it like if I've helped someone land a job, that's really meaningful for me. And like getting those thank you notes, or like helping a founder connect with, one of their customers who ends up being their champion, and, opens a lot of doors for them. Like that's really meaningful. So I think it's just doing more of those like meaningful, like optimistic, positive, like net positive experiences, and making the most positive impact in the world.
That's a really cool answer. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Elaine. I mean, this is timeless advice, and it's been great hearing your story with Alt Capital, and
Yeah, thank you.
I have no doubt that you'll continue doing great things for founders and people you care about. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me on. This is really fun.